been seeing my boyfriend, who we'll call John, for 4 years. We met while we were in college. His parents were strict when he was in high school, so I was the first person he'd ever dated. Because of their religious beliefs, his parents opposed having sex before marriage, and we've been waiting since then. John and his parents are very close. Even though I wasn't particularly interested in their beliefs, I was planning to propose to him in the next 6 months now that he'd graduated. I had already chosen a ring and everything. I was completely in love with this guy. But last weekend, everything changed. Since high school, John had a female best friend, whom his parents disapproved of because of her sexual orientation. Let's call her Sarah. Being in the same college as her meant they could spend as much time together as they wanted, which made John very happy. Although I've never been a huge fan of the opposite-sex best friend dynamic, I was willing to overlook it since she was allegedly gay. However, Sarah came out as bisexual 2 years ago. I asked John to stop spending time with her alone because I never felt comfortable around her. He said that, like his parents, I was trying to control him and didn't support his friends. I told him that I wouldn't stick around for that kind of behavior, but ultimately, it was up to him if he wanted to keep seeing her alone. It was the biggest issue we had ever faced together, but we managed to resolve it. As a compromise, we agreed that Sarah and her partner could spend time with both of us together, but not alone with John. I just wanted a fair boundary, never intending to cut him off from his friends. Until Sarah transferred to another school during the summer, the 4 of us only met up twice. John continued to communicate with her via Discord, maintained friendships with her and her ex-girlfriend, and even joined them along with a few other friends to create a gaming server. Even though most of these friends were women, he reassured me that nothing strange was happening and that most of them even had partners. Sarah invited John to her birthday party last weekend. To make sure I was comfortable, John talked to me about it beforehand. Even though it was only a 2-hour drive away, he said he hadn't seen her in 2 years, and that there would be a number of Discord server friends there, including women he had never met in person before, as well as Sarah's partner. Unfortunately, I couldn't join him because I had a weekend trip planned, leaving Friday and returning on Sunday. I assured John that I trusted him and that I was okay with him seeing his friends. The trouble began on Saturday evening. He texted me in the morning while heading to the party, again when he arrived, and checked in a few more times during the day. Around 9 or 10 p.m., John told me he planned to head back soon. But then, the messages stopped. I didn't want to bother him, since I thought he was just enjoying himself, and didn't want to come across as overbearing. He eventually got home at around 2 a.m., and I stayed up, watching for his messages to make sure he got back safely. Although it was unusual, I trusted him and didn't jump to conclusions. I figured he'd simply explain he was caught up having fun with his friends. When I called the next morning, he didn't answer. A few minutes later, he texted back, saying he wasn't feeling well, had been sleeping, and had a hangover. Considering John never drinks, I found it odd. I wished him well, told him to drink lots of water, and then headed home myself. When I got to my apartment, I found him curled up in my bed in the dark. He had a key to my place, but rarely used it, as I was typically there to let him in. When I asked why he hadn't stayed at his place to rest, he didn't respond. He's barely left my room since then, and has been complaining of not feeling well all week. I've been visiting home during my lunch breaks to check on him, since he took time off from work. In the back of my mind, I was suspicious of what had happened at the party, but I was also worried about him. Late last night, while I was asleep on the couch, John woke me up, sobbing. Other than to use the bathroom, it was the first time he'd left my room since I got home. I comforted him until he could speak, then asked what was wrong. He told me he had done something terrible. After getting accidentally drunk on Saturday night, Sarah offered to drive him home. After dropping Sarah off, 3 of his gaming friends from the Discord server followed in a second car to make sure he got home safely. They helped John up the stairs and into his apartment. Then, he said, he had sex with all of them, all 4 of them. John claimed he was completely out of it and doesn't remember most of what happened. He said he loves me so much and didn't want to hurt me, and he's been feeling sick ever since, trying to figure out how to tell me. He said he had thrown away his virginity, which he had been saving for marriage, to 4 other people instead of the one who had cared for him for 4 years. He insisted he never meant to hurt me. He came to my apartment because he wanted to tell me as soon as I got back, but couldn't bring himself to do it, fearing he'd lose me. He begged me not to break up with him. I told John I needed some time alone to think. After that, he pleaded with me not to force him to go back to his place, so I told him he could stay in my room. I didn't want to argue. Throughout the night, I could hear him sobbing. To be honest, I shed tears myself. It's unreal that he would throw away 4 years of our relationship over a single party. I was ready to propose. My trust in him has been shattered. I couldn't focus at work all day. Part of me wants to tell him to leave as soon as I get home and never see him again. Part of me wants to talk things through and try to salvage what we have left. I don't know which side is more reasonable. How do I move past this? I'm finally getting around to writing this update since John went to bed early, and I have nothing else to do. I think my previous post was deleted due to accusations of being fake. I didn't spend time in the comments refuting those accusations, because when I left work to see John, checking Reddit wasn't even on my mind. To clarify something that was called out, yes, I did have John's location that night, but I only checked it to make sure he made it home safely. I'm not someone who tracks their partner's every move, so I didn't look up his exact location after that. I wouldn't have known exactly where he was unless I rechecked our messages between my trip and arriving home. Now, back to the update. After reading all the comments and reflecting on what happened, I realized what might have truly occurred. Just before lunch, I left work and went home to see John. He was lying in bed, crying, just as I'd left him. With his permission, I went to hold him, and we cried together. I eventually brought up the events of that night. Was any of it really what he wanted? He didn't want to talk much, but he admitted that he didn't want any of what happened. The people at the party were friends of Sarah's, and they weren't just random strangers. He talked to them and played games with them over the past year, but had never met them in person. Over her headset, I'd often hear him chatting with them, and I never found anything strange about it. I was happy he had people to play games with, especially since he's always been shy and introverted. The party wasn't supposed to be a big deal, just a small get-together with some drinks. Most of the people there were LGBTQ, and the vibe was casual. It wasn't supposed to be a wild, alcohol-fueled night. But halfway through the party, someone handed out mystery shots. Sarah convinced John to take one for her birthday. Even though he initially refused, everyone encouraged him, since it was his first. Eventually, John gave in, believing that one shot couldn't hurt. After that, things got blurry. He doesn't know who kept giving him alcohol, but he trusted Sarah to keep an eye on him. He remembers feeling really sick, people passing out on the couch, and Sarah saying she'd drive him home. He remembers her apologizing for letting things get out of hand. He vaguely recalls 2 of his Discord friends getting into a car to follow them and make sure Sarah got back safely. He remembers laughing with them as they helped him upstairs, but after that, everything is a haze. He didn't want any of this to happen. Was he naive? Did he ignore warning signs and make bad decisions? Yes, but that doesn't mean he deserved what happened. The men who did this are to blame. John doesn't want to go to the police, and I fully support his decision. I've read how awful that process can be, and I'll be there for him no matter what. We're planning to see a doctor. John has been in a lot of pain, which is why he stayed curled up in bed for so long. After some convincing, he agreed, even though he really doesn't want to be examined. We'll get tested for STDs and pregnancy, just to be safe. We've cried a lot this weekend, hugged each other, and tried to comfort one another as much as possible. I opened the curtains in the bedroom, and at least he's getting some sunlight now. I'm not forcing him to go back to his apartment, and for those who asked, no, I'm not telling his parents, and I'm certainly not abandoning him. I'll take time off work to help him with doctor visits, therapy, or whatever else comes next. I promise to be there for him through it all. Once again, thank you to everyone who commented on my original post. Your words helped me see things more clearly, and I realized how wrong I was to think only of myself. I hope this update gives some clarity to those who are worried. We're not okay yet, but we're getting there.